Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about the ups and downs of dating and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Alara Sage. Alara is a intuitively gifted mentor, teacher, and healer who coaches provocatively and soulfully. She has over 15 years' experience helping others reignite and transform their lives. More importantly, she has walked the walk. Well, Lara, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you?
I'm fantastic, William. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. So, Lara, tell us how you got here to today. What was that journey like? What made you do, one-on-one coaching and other things, and today's subject is a good one, the art of intimacy. So what was that journey like for you to get here to today? I know it's a loaded question. Maybe you can give us a short version.
I will give you a short version. Yeah, interestingly enough, intimacy was always very challenging for me. And I was actually highly non-orgasmic in most of my life, but I also just intimacy in general, not just in relationships and friendships and etc. And then I started my spiritual journey, and early on in my spiritual journey, I had what's called a Kundalini awakening. It was spontaneous. I didn't know what it was. I was driving in my car. I was headed to go work on some horses because that's what I did at the time. And I had this message to Om 3 times, Om.
Yeah.
And I didn't really do that. That wasn't my practice, but I listened and I did it. And on the third, I did the full breath. And at the end of the third breath, an energy shot from the lower part of my pelvis all the way through my body, out my crown. And I had a full body orgasm.
Wow.
I had never experienced that. I mean, I had to pull the car over because it was just so wonderfully intense. And what had happened was what's called Kundalini Shakti. It's an energy that shoots through our body, and it's really the foundation of Tantra. I think people understand, a little bit about Tantra. So anyways, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what happened to me. I didn't even really know what Kundalini Shakti was. And so I really had this journey for the next 6 months that was pretty intense. And it really deepened into my connection with myself and really, really brought around the question of what is connection? What is presence? And so I really started even to dive deeper and started helping people. And here we are today.
That's an amazing journey and amazing story. I mean, Jesus, today's subject is the art of intimacy. And in your journeys and people you talk to, people you coach, Alara, is the art of intimacy dying? Is it still there? Can it be regained compared to my generation when I was, in my 20s and 30s? I mean, I thought it was there. Maybe I was delusional. I don't know, but I thought it was there. It seems now it's more of a hookup culture where it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, I'm out. Or wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, man, I'm out. Are you seeing that? Or is that's just a tiny percentage that's pretty much just being focused on by social media and just some podcasters and some people in general, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely believe it. It has been a kind of like a cycle or a phase that we've been going through. And we're coming back around. I've heard that the younger generation, they're even doing something called dry dating, where they're not engaging in alcohol anymore, where they date because they want to create actual connection, right from the get-go. So yes, we have lost it largely, through social media and just different ways in which we have disengaged. But all of that was just an example. From my perspective, our physical reality is a house of mirrors. It's just a reflection of what's going on internally. And so all of the social media and the ways that we disconnected were just reflections of ultimately how we've been deeply disconnected. And we were further validating that disconnection and thus creating it. So we're moving into an era now that is radically different, where, learning about how to be embodied, learning how to be in the present moment, learning how to be mindful. These are all things that are really coming into our space that is really going to take us into, honestly, an intimacy that humans haven't experienced in a very, very long time.
Okay, yeah,
Very,
because
very long.
yeah, it seems that way. I think I know you're definitely right because I wanted to touch base back on social media. Has it gone to that extreme that now women seem to have more options than ever before compared to some guys? Again, it depends on the guy. You're hearing the new term high status and sexual market value place. All these new terms I never heard before until like a year or two ago. Um, has social media taken the place of intimacy and now it's just a text world? I hate texting. I want to talk to people. I want to meet people organically, which is going to places and all that. Has social media, especially Instagram and apps like that, have they become the new dating apps of this generation?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that. I again, I feel like it was a cycle that we went through, but I feel like we're coming. I already see us, not everybody, but it's beginning. We're at the beginning phases of coming back out of that. Will we
Okay.
continue to use social media? Will we continue to use dating apps? Absolutely. We're going to be integrated with technology. We're going to be integrated with the internet. That's guaranteed. But we are also already, 2020 was a really big hit
Yeah.
to humanity, and the point of it was to pull us out of fight or flight, to pull us out of the rat race and our addiction
Mm.
to the rat race that humanity has been in. And so what's happening is people are like starting to really value their time. They're starting to really value their own personal desires. And so it's going to start to come back around that yes, we'll use social media to initially connect with people. I met my partner on a dating app,
Okay.
but then we're going to meet in person, and then we're going to deepen into these connections. But it comes down to our ability to really connect with ourselves. That's where intimacy starts, yourself.
Okay, so let's get on the subject of the art of intimacy. So we have to be in touch with ourselves. We have to love ourselves and all that. What are some of the ways that we could do that, especially if you got off to you got a rocky relationship, you broke up, and now you feel whether it's less than or that person was horrible. It's all about they were terrible. I'm good. Are there ways that we could get back into that let's say 1 2 3 steps where we could love ourselves again and then love the other person? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the first thing is really becoming aware of yourself. That's
Mm,
step one. And we do that by, our body is always in the present moment. That's the benefit of the physical body. Our minds are not. Our minds are in the past, our
that's
minds
true.
are in the so-called future, but our bodies are here. So one of the ways that we can really cultivate the relationship with ourself is through our physical body. That's breathing into our body, throughout the day, taking your awareness to your body and just like, hi, body, like breathing into it, feeling it. Because all of the information of who you are as a person, all of your trauma, and all of the trauma of your entire ancestral line, all of your parents' information is literally stored in your DNA and your genetics in your body. So everything that you are creating in your reality, because again, I will further emphasize that you're walking around in a house of mirrors. Those bad relationships are reflecting something within you that you are creating it that way.
Mm,
Okay. Not because you're a piece of shit, right? Not because you're less than, none of that, but because you don't know any better and because you don't realize that you're creating it. So when we start to turn our awareness to the physical body, we become aware of the emotions, the thought patterns, the vibrations in our nervous system that are literally creating these patterns, that are creating these relationships that are not what we're seeking, right? Because we're all
mm,
seeking intimacy, we're all seeking love. We're not going out there being like, gee, I really want to create a really toxic relationship. Like nobody's doing that intentionally, right? So I'm not
yeah.
saying that they're intentionally creating it. They're creating it from their subconscious mind. So first and foremost, being aware of yourself, being aware of what happens, what's my emotional state, what do I feel, what am I thinking? Feeling and thinking are key pointers to learning more about yourself.
Wow. I that was deep. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. You know, because Alara, and we'll talk about Alara Sage. Today's subject is the art of intimacy. I just, it's as I gotten older, I feel definitely more connected with the women that I hang out with, whether we're friends or not. And one of the things, um, when you break up with someone and it's a bad relationship, do we tend to bring that person that we were or we weren't to the next relationship? Does that make sense? Because it seems like we might not be aware of what we did or what the other person did. We just said we might blame them for something that we weren't aware of, or we just don't want to see it in ourselves. Do we bring ourselves to the next person? And that's not fair for them because, like you said, uh um we're not taking a step back and focusing on ourselves and trying to find out what we did wrong or what we did right or something. Again, do we bring ourselves to the next relationship, and how bad is that? If
Yeah,
it's if it's
absolutely.
from a bad relationship, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely we do that. But not only do we bring the ourselves from the last relationship, you bring yourself throughout your whole life. And again, so you bring
Mm,
the you, what happened to yourself in childhood? What happened to your relationships, your friendships? And even deeper, what is the relationship and with you and your mother? What is the relationship with you and your father? How was the relationship between your mother and your father? How did your mother show up in life? How did your father show up in life? These points are huge because they were your initial imprints of woman and of man and of relationship. And imprint is exact word because it
mm,
imprinted into your nervous system before you even understood what the word relationship really meant. You took on everything that you saw, everything you experienced with your parents, you literally took that into your body as this is what love is. This is what
wow.
love is. Yeah, it's profound. So if you were abused as a child in any way, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, you took that on as that is what love is. Abuse equals love.
Mm,
And that's huge, right? Because now you're going to go out and create that because that's all you know to be true. Again, not in your conscious mind. You know that to be true in your subconscious mind. So again, you're not going out there saying, hey, I want to be abused because I believe that's what love is, but that's what you're going to attract unless you're really, really aware. And or you're going to do the opposite, which is a hard push away because it's either there's always two reactionary processes. But anyways, point being, it's all of your relationships, it's all of your experiences from early childhood. When I work with clients, we go always back to 3 to 6 years of age. three
mm,
to six years of age is when you were imprinted. At age
wow.
7, you already have all of your beliefs created in your physical body. And now you start to validate them. You create them and you validate. You create and you validate.
You hit it right on the head about early childhood, and I won't say trauma for myself, but you definitely hit it on the head because for me, when I was younger, I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no clear memory from 3 to 6 at all, none. My mom would tell me things that I did, and I'm like, geez, I don't remember that. Anyway, getting to my point, I remember in my early 20s, Alara, anytime that a girl got close, I ran away. I had no idea why.
Mm,
And none. Same thing in my late 20s until I started noticing, till my mother was telling me about some of the things because I grew up with my grandparents.
mm,
So, what stuck in my mind? Oh,
yes.
she didn't care. She didn't want me.
Yes.
She had to explain it to me. And I'm like, holy shit. If you would have told me this earlier, things might have been a little different, because and it's funny because I was looking back. There was a couple of women, or at least one or two women that I could have married. To me, they were the right ones for me, but because I was so afraid at that time of intimacy, I couldn't do it. Again, it was becoming aware as I got into my late 20s and early 30s. So I get what you're saying. Do a lot of people realize that they might not know that like you said, the childhood trauma 3 to 6, and then also from age 7 and on, what they see is what is their reality.
Yeah, no, nobody realizes that. And I
Wow.
love how you bring it forward in this context. I love your story because that was very relatable. And I do want to say that even though I brought up trauma, it doesn't have to be trauma because again,
Mm,
it's just a reflection of.
yeah.
So if your parents were just busy, maybe they worked a lot and they just weren't available, then again, like your definition of love is like absent, right? Like the
Mm,
person is absent in your life. and it goes, there's so many different variables. It's not just that one, but that's one of the ways that we can start to learn about ourselves is, again, turning our awareness to what was my relationship with my mother, what was my relationship with my father, what was their relationship. And
Mm.
also with, like, if you were raised by your grandparents, same thing, right? Because they were implemental in your life. So there's so many different things we can learn by looking at those initial relationships.
Yeah, it's funny because uh when my mother started talking to me about what happened, again, I started realizing, I'm like, oh, okay, so it wasn't me. It was like you said, they were working, plus they were, you could say, babies. She was 16 when she had me. So, and he was 18. Your kids. Maybe back in those days in the 60s that was normal, but Jesus, how times have changed. So again, for me, when I realized what was happening, I kind of like said, "Oh, you know what? It wasn't me. It wasn't personal. This was the story. I took it in a different direction." So yeah. So please, I know you're not in your head. So please go, go, go.
Yeah, no, I mean, that I'm nodding my head because that's just really beautiful
Yeah.
self-awareness. Like,
Yeah.
so like that's what we're talking about here is like that self-awareness to be able to say, oh, like my mom and my dad, like they just couldn't deal with it, right? Like it was just too much. And probably you were, in all honesty, like, kind of like quote unquote better off that your grandparents raised you because they
Yes. A
had the
hundred
emotional
percent. Yes.
intelligence.
Yes.
They
Yes.
had the availability. If you would have been raised by your parents, they would have been all over the place. Maybe not. Like that's a total
No.
presumption,
No. No.
but most
Alara.
likely, right?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to control but you hit on the head. When I realized later on that I was better off with my grandparents because around the time I was 12, 10, 12, something like that, my parents divorced. And it was such a mess because, my brother went with my father, my sisters went with my mother, and I was with my grandparents. So we were all like separated. So, yes, years later, I realized, you know what? I was better off. Things could have turned a different direction. So yeah, I mean, your point is definitely well taken.
Yeah. And I just want to make one more point to the beauty of your self-awareness is, oh, it wasn't about me. And this is
No,
something that I hope listeners really hear from me. We take everything personal
yeah,
until we realize we don't have to take anything personal. Okay. And that one thing that we do by taking it personal, we see it personal, we react to it personally, and we further like create this real self-hate basically, or unworthiness within ourselves. And
mhm,
the truth of it is just like if we take the example that you brought forward, it wasn't because your mom was like, oh, get away, I don't want you. It's because she's like, I can't do this, right? And so again, if when we're able to see from the other person's perspective, from their perspective, not from our perspective into their life. It's called
yeah,
empathy, the ability to put yourself truly into somebody else's shoes. When you
mm,
really have empathy and you can feel and experience, like, wow, that person is really having a hard time, or they don't believe that they're worthy. And that's the reason that they're pushing me away. They don't
yeah.
believe that they're worthy. So they're pushing me away. Like, oh, it just opens our heart to the compassion of the experience.
Yeah, no, that's definitely I love the empathy part because when like I said, when I spoke to my mom years and years ago and she explained what happened, I'm like, oh, okay. Again, it was I was open-minded, my heart was open, everything, my mind was open. And then it relieved any stress I had, any pain I had, any doubt I had. And I said, oh shoot, I could definitely move forward. And again, then after that, some of my relationships got better and better and better because I was able to let go of that past. And to our title, the show, The Art of Intimacy, I was able to use it and say, hey, you know what? uh this woman likes me for me, not, there's a motive for her to like me, if that makes sense, because I would think that at the beginning. I'm like, why is she with me? Why am I here for something? Is she after money, whatever? Because I had doubt in myself because of what I went through with my mother. Again, when I got older, those were all gone. Bad
Yes,
doc, sorry.
exactly.
Go ahead, Laura, sorry.
No, yeah, because so what happened with you, and this is the other part of the art of intimacy that's really, really important, right? Is because you were able to, again, have that self awareness, be like, oh, it wasn't me. Like, I can let that go, right?
Yeah.
That really opens us and enables us to become more vulnerable. And, humans have a real, from my perspective, a misunderstanding about what vulnerability is.
Mhm.
To me, vulnerability isn't like going around and sharing everything with everybody, right? Like that
Right.
is a form of vulnerability, but that's not what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is literally what you did. Vulnerability is a willingness to look at yourself and say, oh, wow, look how I've been doubtful of myself and really doubtful of why these women want to be with me. Like that's vulnerability, the willingness to see your own wounding,
Mhm.
because we hide it. We hide it so strongly
Yeah.
from ourselves, first and foremost. And so when we're willing to see our wounding and being like, oh, I'm holding this doubt because of my mom, I don't have to do that anymore. We let it go and we literally open our hearts and we are enabled in that space to engage more deeply and more truthfully in the relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the key is just being able to let that go, whatever you had carried. And how effective is communication with that other person, whether it's a parent or even maybe an ex, and going back and say, okay, was there something that I did wrong? I mean, I'm one of those guys, Alara, that I personally I don't need closure. To me, if a woman doesn't like me anymore, okay, that's you pretty much you said it in your actions. I can move on. I'm okay with that. But there's some people that can't let go. They want to know what they did wrong, what could they do right for the next person. Is that something that you would talk to your clients one on one on about maybe trying to get closure if that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, all the answers are honestly with yourself. You
Okay.
don't need to go to the other person. There might be some circumstances where that might be beneficial, but most likely the other person is going to see the circumstance through their perspective, which may or
Mm,
may not be clear. So they might just blame you, but maybe that's not the full story, right?
right.
So if you are wanting closure, you can really ask yourself the questions of why did this happen? There are many ways in which we can find those pointers. They're called triggers. When you have an emotional hit of
Mm,
like tension, anxiety, anger, like, sadness, resentment, right? Those are triggers. Those are points where there is a wound that is literally being poked in that moment, because those emotions have nothing to do with the other person.
mm,
Nothing. We say, you made me angry. No, that person didn't. They did an action. They did something that poked your wound that already existed.
that's it.
That's the only
Wow.
reason you had a trigger. So all of our answers are here. Now, I do want to talk about communication, because in the art of intimacy, communication is key. And as humans, we have this real like, gee, I don't want to expose myself, right? I don't want to talk about it. I don't
Mm,
want to tell the other person what I'm thinking or feeling, because then they're going to judge me. And that really stops us. It totally
mm,
cock blocks us from really having compassion and empathy in a relationship. So, although I don't recommend having conversations necessarily in those past experiences,
sure.
communication currently is enormous.
Right. No, I definitely agree. And it's funny because I started learning more about communicating. And it's funny because, and you know this, Alara, women always want men to communicate more, and that's our, and for me, I used to keep things to myself. And it was slowly but surely letting things out at a time. I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling better and the relationship is getting better because I am communicating. I'm not holding things back. So, listen, I definitely appreciate that. First of all, I want to thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really appreciate it. And before I let you go, talk more about your one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, so I work with women. I help them to reconnect to themselves. Really, this intimacy that we're talking about, this is what I do. I help women to reconnect to their bodies, their power, the authenticity, their true depth of really who they are. And I work with those women one-on-one, and it's transformational. It transforms their lives. These are women who are usually feeling unfulfilled. They
Mm,
feel lonely. Doesn't matter what they're creating in their life, it just never feels alive. They could be
right.
very, very successful, but like it's something is missing inside. And so through the process of working with me, they really connect to that inner fulfillment and that inner joy. And that shifts everything in their life. And most importantly, it shifts their relationships very dramatically, whether
No,
they have a relationship or not.
oh, no, sounds good. Yeah, exactly. It sounds good. Anything else you would like to promote?
Yeah, so I do have a free series. It's called a self-trust series because
Okay.
the art of intimacy is about self-trust. We have to have that self-trust first before we can ever trust another person.
Mm.
So it's a free 3-part video series, and I'll give you that link. And it's a wonderful beginning to that journey with the self.
Yeah, I'll definitely put on the show notes. And if somebody want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, alarasage.com. And I am on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Alara Sage.
All right, sounds good. Well, Lara, again, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. I really, really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.